5 minutes ago, Prince William and Catherine accomplished something that Queen Camilla never would have imagined they would do. They attested to the fact that the royal title she fought for, awaited and eventually acquired, now had an official conclusion, a signed ruling, as opposed to a caution or a recommendation. And the person whose consent appeared at the bottom of that decision is the reason this news has rocked the palace. For years, Camilla has operated under a single unspoken premise. As long as Charles supported her, the position she had spent decades creating could not be contested. Catherine might stay away, and William might object. Advisors might express concerns, but Camilla believed that since Charles was king, his security would always be adequate. Then the emergency meeting began. It happened behind closed doors in Buckingham Palace, away from staff photographers and the formal language usually used to hide family conflict. William was pursued by Catherine. Charles and Camilla were seated already. In the center of the table was a sealed succession file with a decision that had already progressed well beyond discussion. A senior advisor who had access to the packet examined the first clause. Although Camilla would remain queen for the remainder of Charles's reign, her title, domestic authority, ceremonial precedence, and power would all end with his reign. There was no clear core of power, no protected role, and no automatic continuity in William's monarchy. Before the second page is revealed, anyone who believes that William and Catherine are right to protect the future of the crown should subscribe, like, and share this video right away, because Camilla's influence only lasts when no one is willing to challenge it, and the palace can pretend that the public doesn't care, while their followers remain silent. The mood of the room changed as William spoke. He only said that unresolved issues with loyalty, entitlement, and power prevented the monarchy from advancing to its next phase. He didn't scream or make allegations. A single family, a single monarch, and a clear chain of authority would all exist. Future employment for Camilla might not be free from this kind of control. Catherine's silence worried Camilla more than any argument. William was expected to defend his future authority. Catherine's presence showed that the decision was shared. She hadn't come to watch, but to confirm. Then they switched to the second page. A list of requests pertaining to Camilla's house was included. Continuous hiring, authority over senior appointments, unlimited entry to royal residences, strategies for security following Charles's reign, great consideration for her relatives. Each request appeared feasible on its own. Together, they seemed to be the foundation of a house designed to outlive the monarch who founded it. Hi everyone. Are you happy that William and Catherine finally stood up to Camilla? If the answer is yes, don't watch in silence. Instead, write a comment. Please tell others about this video and subscribe to it. The backing of William and Catherine's supporters is useless if they remain silent when the future of the monarchy is being decided. Anticipating William's reluctance, Charles turned to face him. Nobody appeared. Finally, Catherine leant over the paper to deliver the unexpected point Camilla had not expected. A regal title, in her opinion, had to imply responsibility. It could not be converted into private property or used to provide long-term benefits for relatives who had no constitutional obligation. Camilla reviewed the clause again. She had endured years of hostility, lived beneath Diana's shadow, and waited for the day when the palace would recognize her as safe. William and Catherine were now telling her that the title had not been acquired at all. The most dangerous page was still below the expiration date. It stated that as the decision had already been integrated into the succession plan, it couldn't be subtly altered. Camilla turned to face Charles. He would not meet her gaze. The permission sign at the bottom of the page was immediately recognizable to her. It wasn't William's. It wasn't Catherine's. The order depriving Elizabeth of her future title was initially issued by Charles, but that mark was only the first problem. The greater threat was that William had not yet granted Camilla permission to read. For months, a team from the palace had been studying how royal homes would operate when Charles's reign ended. It began as a typical workout. Nothing, not even housing personnel-level ceremonial duties or security arrangements, can drive a family apart. Then the requests began to arrive. One asked that certain household members remain in their current positions after William's coronation. Another desired to keep control over appointments pertaining to residences, charities, and ceremonial offices. A third proposed that even if Camilla's close associates had no formal duties under the incoming queen, they should nevertheless have access to particular travel security and housing options. On their own, the requests seemed harmless. When assembled, they looked like a building. William had read every page before the meeting. Instead of just surviving a change in power, he saw a house preparing to uphold its own authority. Workers would remain. Access would still be possible. Influence would still exist. Even if the title lost its constitutional purpose, the process surrounding it would continue to operate. He wouldn't cross that boundary. Charles dismissed the concern as an administrative blunder. Camilla had endured years of public hostility, collaborated with him, funded charities, and represented the monarchy. According to him, continuity is not a right. It acted as a buffer to prevent loyal workers from being let go as soon as William assumed the throne. But William had considered such defense before. He questioned why the reigning queen's privileges should be extended beyond her reign, why Camilla's family members were included in various requests rather than working royals with responsibilities, why influence over appointments was necessary for continuity, and why permanent access to specific properties was necessary. The room narrowed. Camilla answered. Her family had never asked to be royal, she asserted. They had experienced intrusion inspection and criticism during her marriage. Any help described in the papers was designed to protect them against unforeseen consequences. Catherine watched her silently. Then she asked one question. What sort of service would such benefits represent? No one answered. That delay exposed the inadequacy of the entire argument. Duty might be upheld when royal privilege did. It became more harder to explain when it was based on genetics, private allegiance, or personal comfort. Catherine's concern was not just public, but also constitutional. Every apartment, every employee position, every security system, and every appointment would eventually be subject to the same question outside the palace. Why should it continue? And who was it serving? Charles shifted in his chair. Compared to most others, he understood public wrath better. He had witnessed small financial disagreements escalate into major conflicts. He knew that a single ill-founded privilege may overwhelm months of public service. Camilla refused to concede the argument. She said that William and Catherine were treating her as though she were building a competing court. For them, planning was turning into a show of ambition. She contended that the next reign might respect the current queen without weakening its own authority. William opened the dossier. He presented her just a single page. There were 6 basic terms at the top. Continue following the current ruler. It didn't appear to matter about the rest of the room. That term had kept cropping up during the investigations. It wasn't short-term care terminology. It was not the language of transformation. It clarified something meant to survive Charles and carry on under William. Camilla's expression changed for an instant. According to her, the term originated with officials. She didn't write it. She hadn't authorized every word. Papers were constantly created at home, but not all of them reached her desk. That response created a new problem. Camilla would have entered the meeting fully aware of what William had discovered if she had approved the requests. Otherwise, someone on her staff would have been conspiring much beyond her instructions. Both choices were dangerous. The senior advisor looked over the warning document. Camilla's administration had been repeatedly reminded that no title, resident staff structure, or privilege could automatically survive the end of the reigning monarch's rule. It had been a clear warning. It had also been ignored. The requests continued. One appeared 3 weeks after the first warning. A second conversation with constitutional advisors was followed by another. The last request was made a few days before William and Catherine were summoned to review the succession file. This was no longer a miscommunication. Charles turned to face Camilla, expecting for an explanation, but she failed to provide one. William remained still. Catherine reached for a thinner folder beneath the document, and Camilla knew the date right away. She had thought that meeting was confidential. She had also believed that there was no written record. Sliding the first page across the table, Catherine opened the second appendix. It wasn't a letter, it was a transcript. The memo recorded a private discussion that had taken place months earlier between Camilla's family and palace advisors. There was one particularly memorable exchange. According to an official, the current queen's authority does not immediately transfer to the next reign. Camilla's response had been straightforward. Look for a different route. The line was recited twice by Camilla. She then turned to face Catherine. For the first time, the stress became personal that evening. Camilla asked Catherine if she understood what she was supporting. Every statement was filled with years of frustration. William protected Catherine, who was welcomed by the country as the monarchy's future. Camilla had chosen a different path. She believed she would never fit in with Charles and had been rejected. For decades, she had been anticipating the title. Now Catherine was helping to add a conclusion beneath it. Catherine closed the appendix with both hands on the table. She answered coolly. She believes that sacrifice can explain the meaning of a title. It was unable to decide how that title should operate once its constitutional objective had been achieved. That difference changed the room. Camilla had been discussing survival strategies. Catherine was discussing limits. She realized Camilla had been under constant public scrutiny for years. She acknowledged that during his reign, Charles had chosen her, defended her, and made space for her. That was not going to be eliminated. However, the new reign was unable to be controlled by the debts accrued under the preceding one. Payment was not a title, it was a service. When the role was completed, the service was terminated. Camilla squinted her eyes. When Catherine's turn arrived, she asked if she expected to give up everything with the same ease. The investigation's goal was to expose hypocrisy. Catherine answered right away. If they did, the authority that accompanied her duties ought to cease as well. No home should persevere simply because the previous leader of the household found comfort in power. William looked up at her. He knew what her role was. It was obvious that hearing it gave the decision a moral significance that the law's wording could not. Camilla turned to Charles, wondering if he would agree to William and Catherine seeing her as merely an administrative term. Charles looked exhausted. He asserted that no one was shortening her life. What followed his rule was a contentious issue. That response harmed her more than the opposition. Charles had recognized the difference. Camilla withdrew the appendix. She insisted that she was unaware of the warnings. She had never authorized anyone to search for a way to get around William's future power. Her office handled a lot of drafts. Some were curious, while others never reached her. The senior advisor opened a second record. It showed that the warning had been sent to her private secretary. It was verified to have been opened by a receipt. A meeting for the following morning was added to Camilla's private agenda. No subject was brought up. No minutes were turned in. However, a new request later that day included the phrase, "continuation beyond the present sovereign." Someone had taken action. Who was the question? Camilla said that her confidential secretary had misinterpreted. William inquired as to if the necessities pertaining to housing personnel and family access were also covered by that miscommunication. Officials usually made broad options before fine-tuning them, she said. Catherine paid attention. Then she asked why Camilla's future standing increased with each decision and decreased with none. Once more, there was no response. Charles intervened. He inquired as to whether the process could be halted, while Camilla's office conducted an independent review. He argued that a halt would set her goals apart from what the staff was doing. William shook his head. Internal assessment was no longer required. The family of Camilla had been informed. It had continued to ask for things. The succession team responded. If we wait, a dispute that everyone might anticipate could threaten the next reign. Charles asked the question he had avoided. Was there a penalty for this? William answered immediately. Quantity. It was a form of defense. Protection not from Camilla directly, but from uncertainty. From contradictory instructions. From workers claiming prior authority. From relatives who desire preferential treatment. From a future court forced to debate promises made during its early months under a previous sovereign. Catherine opened the appendix again and turned to the final page. Beneath the warnings was the legal basis for the ruling. The clause was not written by William. Catherine had failed to arrive. It was based on a change that had been approved months before with the goal of preserving the relationship between active duty and royal titles, families, mansions, and public backing. Charles himself signed it. He stooped. Suddenly, the room was still. Catherine expressed what no one had spoken aloud with one finger beneath the signature. William was not using a new rule to take away Camilla's future authority. Charles was enforcing his own rule. If Charles tried to excuse his wife at this point, he would also have to admit that everyone was impacted by the reform, except for the woman besides him. Camilla turned to the king with gentleness. This time he couldn't help but stare. Charles stared at the signature as though it belonged to someone else. Months earlier, the reform had seemed simple. Make the monarchy simpler. Reduce the amount of duplication. Link public support to active duty. Prevent future households from growing beyond what is required. It had been presented as a clear resolution to years of grievances around cost privilege and unclear responsibility. Now the same paper is staring inward. The senior advisor explained the result in detail. After Charles's reign ended, Camilla would no longer be the sovereign's consort. Her ceremonial effort might be honored. She could maintain her dignity. But by default, the ruling queen's power was overthrown. Under the alteration duty ended first. Next came privilege. Charles wanted to know if an exception could be written. The answer was given in silence. Yes, but not without consequences. Camilla's exemption would require proof evidence and argumentation. It would show that the regulation applied to every household save the king's household. All decisions made under the reform would be re-examined. Houses, workers, funding, security, titles. Nothing would remain settled. Now is the chance to show whether or not people believe William and Catherine are right to stop one house from breaching the law. Share, like, and subscribe to the video now. Support is useless if it stays silent, especially when the people safeguarding the future of the crown are being expected to foot the whole bill. Camilla heard the justification and ignored it. She said that the palace was hiding a private decision behind constitutional language. No regulation had forced William to take action. In an emergency, Catherine didn't have to sit next to him. They had chosen the time because they wanted the matter settled before Charles could stand up for her. William took a while to reply. He opened the document in a separate section. The reform was already incorporated in the succession planning record. Copies had been sent to the legal office private secretaries and advisors responsible for the next reign. Charles and his staff no longer had a confidential pledge. It was now part of the apparatus that would oversee the transfer of power. That changed everything. Charles may alter the regulations while he is in power, but any modification meant solely to preserve Camilla's standing would be clear. It could not be buried. It could not be described as routine. A paper trail was already in place. Then the door opened. Princess Anne did not have a ceremonial entrance. She had been asked to evaluate the change because of her long service under 2 reigns and her acquaintance with royal residences. She knew about the conflicts before she walked into the meeting, and she knew exactly what the weakness was. Anne didn't look at Camilla first. She looked at Charles. She reminded him that reform could only be successful if its proponents recognized its shortcomings. A monarch could not limit households' demand discipline from the family question established arrangements, and then renounce all principles when his wife was under the same scrutiny. Charles said Camilla was more than a relative. Anne agreed. For precisely this reason, rather than being less strict, the requirements needed to be more specific. Camilla accused Anne of supporting William and Catherine against her. Anne refuted the accusation. Love, she insisted, was not the issue. Offices were present. One was a component of the existing regime. One would be a component of the next. If they were blurred, family members, advisors, and staff would assert power from two different sources. There wasn't much risk. It was related to administration. As a result, it became worse. A palace can become confused without open confrontation. There is only one dubious instruction needed. An appointment was contested by one office. The access that one relative provided will not be recognized by the succeeding ruler. A previous arrangement is still in force according to an elderly home. William knew he was in danger. Catherine followed suit. She pointed to the section about antecedents. If Camilla retained the actual title of queen after Charles's reign, where would the next queen stand? Who would talk first at formal events? Whose household would be in charge of workers? Which office would accept foreign visitors? Even a ceremonial ambiguity could cause a public rift. Camilla claimed that Catherine was protecting her own opportunities. Catherine didn't dispute it. She proposed that the future reign needed clarity rather than rivalry. Just as Camilla had to stand behind Charles, she had an obligation to protect that clarity. The legal expert then presented the unchangeable decision. The framework was sound. The succession chronicle was completed. Camilla's automatic future authority had already been eliminated as a matter of policy. Charles may argue against it. He may request a second review. He may even attempt to replace the framework. But he couldn't make the record disappear or erase the motivations behind its creation. Camilla pushed the folder aside. She demanded that Charles reverse the decision before anyone outside the room found out. William finally met her gaze. Charles could object. He may delay it, but he could no longer take it out in silence. In the future, they were preparing for the decision had already been made. Camilla refrained from looking at Charles again. She looked at William. For the first time, the question between them that evening was free of consultant's documentation and constitutional ease. It became painfully simple, personal and simple. Was he truly prepared to remove her? William answered without changing his expression. It was unrelated to his desires for Camilla. It was about what the next reign could safely carry. The succession plan had previously been approved. The line had been drawn by them. Instead of pretending it didn't exist, it was his responsibility to confirm it. Camilla turned to face Catherine. Catherine attested to it as well, without a doubt. No softened language. In the shadow of divided power, she said the next court could hardly begin. Camilla would be treated with dignity. She would be honored for the role she had played alongside Charles. However, the authority attached to the title of queen would cease to exist if that service were to expire. It was present. That moment could not be altered by anyone in the room. Charles rose from his chair and approached the window. He had spent years shielding Camilla from the memory of all that had occurred to her, as well as from both public and private hostility. The greatest threat to her position at this point did not come from outside the palace. It came from the next king. Charles proposed a compromise. Camilla might continue the ceremonial style after his rule. The staff would be reduced rather than removed. Her home would still remain in a scaled-down form. She would still clearly have the honor of a queen, even though she would no longer have administrative authority. For a time, the atmosphere seemed to relax. Then William said no. Not because he wanted to denigrate her, but because vague titles gave him real power. Staff members followed names. Rank was valued by officials. Expectations about access were established by family members. A ceremonial style could quickly become an unofficial office, especially if people in Camilla's near proximity continued to act as though nothing had changed. Catherine proposed a more limited path. Camilla might be given a residence free from disturbance seclusion and security befitting to her position. None of it, though, would immediately have authority over the next family. No nominations, no directions from top personnel, and no influence provided as a basic prerogative. Camilla heard a single word beneath it all. Declined. Before becoming a reclusive widow, who was politely positioned on the outskirts of William's court, she had not put up with decades of criticism. She had endured the difficult journey from outsider to queen, only to be told that the title would vanish the moment Charles did. The press secretary presented a written statement. The quarrel William and Catherine and removal were not mentioned. The wording described the decision as a constitutional clarification concerning housing arrangements in a future rule. Camilla almost started laughing. The words were so intentional that they appeared to have very little significance. William read the statement and then set it aside. He said that public language may be restrained, while the internal record needed to be precise. The title's authority would end upon the change of reign. Any following style would require the formal assent of the succeeding sovereign. The household of a separate queen could not exist on its own. No family privileges would be transferred. The private secretary wrote every word. Then came the question of signatures. Charles was curious as to where he was meant to sign. The attorney replied that no more signatures were required. Months earlier, Charles had granted permission to approve the framework. The Palace Council's examination was complete. The succession file contained an entry. Rather than offering a recommendation, William and Catherine were validating the current order's application. Camilla stopped moving. All of her thoughts about the event changed at that instant. With only one order, she had thought Charles could save her. She had believed that the monarch remained the final barrier between her and the future William envisioned. But Charles had already relinquished that power, perhaps not on purpose, perhaps not willingly. But the result didn't change. The final page was shown to Camilla. There was a set of initials towards the bottom, in addition to the original authorization for the reform. She recognized the handwriting right away. Charles. She looked at the man by the window instead of the page. He seemed older in the low light, less like a monarch in charge of the room, and more like a spouse who was about to give an answer he did not want to. Camilla touched the initials with one finger. The space was ready. William said nothing. Catherine said nothing. Anne remained still as well. Camilla asked Charles if he had known. He turned slowly. Before he could reply, though, the advisor closed the outer folder, revealing a final sealed attachment beneath, a document that none of them had discussed. It had Catherine's name printed on the front. The sealed attachment has Catherine's name on it, but it wasn't written by her. She wrote the memo during a covert meeting with the constitutional consultants responsible for the impending reign. Catherine had asked one question: what would happen if a former queen continued to give directives through staff after a new sovereign took the throne? The answer was 3 pages long. Any unauthorized instructions could lead to confusion over appointments, access security, and public representation. It could force the next monarch to face his father's wife in public. Catherine had requested that the risk be handled before it reached that point. Camilla immediately understood it. Catherine had failed to attend the emergency meeting, despite being William's ally. She had helped identify the weakness that brought everyone to that point. Charles opened the memo. His eyes skimmed the page, stopping at the last recommendation. The serving consort's power had to expire at the transfer of power, unless the new king extended it. Catherine's response fell short of that recommendation. In theory, I concur. From across the table, Camilla gave her a quick glance. Her bitterness against William shifted. Catherine hadn't yelled, pushed herself forward, or threatened anyone. She waited for the palace to reach the only conclusion it could defend, after asking the question that no one in Charles's immediate vicinity wanted to answer. Charles finally answered Camilla. He said he knew about the reform. He had expected fewer households in the future. He didn't know, though, that advisors would properly apply it to her title. He believed that all technical developments would be met with respect for her position. Camilla asked whether he had read the last few phrases. Charles paused. It was enough to stop. He signed the framework. He had left the details to others. Somewhere between his aim and the language added to the succession file, Camilla's future authority had disappeared. No one celebrated. William was seeing his father realize that his own signature had created the biggest split in the room, even if he had attained clarity. Catherine had provided protection for the next reign, but this protection put Charles in front of his wife. Even though Anne defended the regulation, she was aware of what had been lost. Camilla stood up. She didn't ask for the papers again. She went on. Everyone in the room had made a decision, and each would eventually have to deal with how that decision was remembered. Then she left. The door closed softly. The dispute was then irreversible. Charles remained at the window, while advisors collected the files. Charles raised a hand as William approached him. He was not interested in an explanation. Then, no, the son who would succeed to the king had protected the institution. The spouse wearing it had not shielded the woman besides him. It is possible for the two truths to coexist. Anne stayed after William and Catherine departed. She clarified to Charles that a family's unwillingness to discuss succession concerns never eliminates them. They wait. They provoke hostility, then re-emerge when no one is prepared. Outside the chamber, further orders were dispatched to Camilla's residence. Employee contracts would be reviewed. Future access would require approval. Private and constitutional agreements would be kept apart. Nothing changed in the public eye that night, but inside the palace preparations had begun. William and Catherine left through a private doorway, avoiding contact with the waitstaff. They had entered as the Prince and Princess of Wales. They left as the unified center of the next reign. Camilla had her title, but she was no longer in control of its destiny. The palace statement that was eventually released to the public used careful wording: uniformity, rationale, modify. There was no mention of the conflict of the initials or the instant Charles did not answer. The real decision, however, was protected by irrevocable signatures in the succession file. And there was still one puzzle to solve. Did Charles misunderstand what he signed, or did he foresee the reform's end and allow William to do what he couldn't? If you believe that William and Catherine were right to draw the line, please subscribe, like, and share this story immediately. The palace will be able to replace a crucial moment with phrases that will make everyone forget if you stay silent. But the next revelation might be even worse. Another document was stolen from Camilla's office that same evening. 3 royal appointments, 1 private property, and the name of the first family member Camilla wished to have protected were all listed in handwritten form. That name changes everything.